Praise the Lord, everyone. So glad to have you here this Wednesday on Bible class night. We pray that everyone is able to hear us and see us. Glad to have you here this Wednesday. We're going to continue to, we're actually going to have a little interruption of our normal message today as we've been looking at Hebrews. And today we're going to take a look at the loss. We're going to look at the lost justice. And why did my thing not do what I wanted to do? As we look at lost justice, we're looking at how the justice that should be there in America is lost. And as we look at that, Ecclesiastes, the writer begins to tell us about the lost justice. And I want to speak to you from that mindset as we look at our society and what's happening and everything that we're facing, how justice has been lost. And as I get ready to bring that message to you and give a couple people time to get on, I want to tell our church Sunday, we will have our outside parking lot service Sunday. We will be outside, so we want to invite you out to come and be a part of that service again. We had a blessed time last time, and it was enjoyable to be able to see you all, to be able to sing God's praises, to be able to be safe in the midst of all that's going on in the world today. So Sunday, 3 p.m., we will have our outside parking lot service at 15209 Florida Avenue. So come out and worship God with us. So now, unfortunately, some of my settings didn't save like I wanted them to, but Ecclesiastes, I'm going to read for you. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse number 8. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse number 8. So if we look at that, it says, "If thou seest oppression of the poor and violent perverting of judgment and justice in a province, marvel not at the matter, for he that is higher than the highest regardeth, and there be higher than they." So when we look at this passage in Ecclesiastes, this passage here, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse number 8, and actually, I might be able to type that up real quick. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse number 8, that in doing so, there's justice that gets lost in the ranks. And my wife and I, we were talking about how, sometimes in these nursery rhymes, things get lost. Little Red Riding Hood going to her grandmother's house and so forth, or not nursery, the fairy tales and so forth, or the nursery rhymes. How sometimes things can get lost. And when we look at our lives and we can look at the planning of our society and our system and how things get lost along the way. In doing so, here, Ecclesiastes is pointing out how in hierarchy of society, in rulership, how things get lost. And it's possible for justice to be lost. So when we're looking at this, and as I was coming in today, and for the sake of time, I hope I spelled Ecclesiastes right. That's not one of the easiest Bible verses to spell, but in doing so, coming in today, listening on the radio, I didn't put the whole thing down, listening on the radio, how, people are talking about what's going on in society. They're talking about the riots and everything. They're talking about the burning down of the buildings and all those things. But let's not forget here that the start of all of this has come from a life that's lost. And no way do we condone anyone doing anything wrong downtown, but there's a life that is lost. And in looking at this, we have to brace ourselves for the justice system that may not produce what we see as justice. Because even though counts are going up, they raised it from third degree, even though the other officer were charged in with being complicit in just watching and not intervening, it just takes one juror to change a whole decision. So we have to be mindful that, and I like what the verse is trying to tell us and teach us. God is speaking here. He says, if thou seest the oppression of the poor and violent perverting of judgment and justice in province, marvel not at the matter. God is telling us we shouldn't be surprised by the failure of mankind. We shouldn't be surprised by the crooked nature of men and women. Now, I'm not saying everyone's crooked, and I'm not saying every police officer is crooked or any of those things, because we believe that the police force can be wonderful, but the problem is when we get bad officers. Just like protests can be wonderful, exercising your constitutional rights, but it can be bad when that one bad person or people are out there and they are trying to go without the cause into their own matters. So here, lost justice. Justice is lost at times in society. And we have to understand, God says, don't marvel at it. Don't be surprised. Don't be shocked. And it is a surprise and a shock to us when we want to see things happen the right way. But God says, don't marvel, don't be shocked. Now, I don't want you to believe either that God doesn't know what he's talking about. And when I use the term God, I need you to understand that I'm speaking about Jesus also, because I'm going to give you an example in regards to Jesus. So I need you to understand when I say God, I'm talking about Jesus, God and Jesus. He says that if you've seen the Father, you've seen me. He says that I and my Father are one. The Bible tells us that God became, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So God and the Word are the same. The Bible tells us the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So we can go all through that, and I can have that right to be able to use God and Jesus interchangeably. So in looking at Jesus, now we hear this from the author Ecclesiastes, we hear this from Solomon speaking to us, and they were dealing with some different types of issues there, and that was more looking at maybe more in the financial realm and so forth. But the fact is that he was saying, marvel not when justice is lost, when people are oppressed. So we're to understand that that's going to happen in our world and our society today. And if you're commenting and so forth or on there, I'm sorry, I'm not set up to see that right now. Like I said, I'm a little behind today, and I'm going to take the L for that, but I'm a little behind. But in doing so, getting back to our lesson, God bless you all. I love you. I'm glad you're on. I expect Jeff to be on. He sent me a message earlier. I expect him to be on. But everyone that's on, God bless you. Glad to have you. Justice, we're looking at how justice is lost. So in looking at Jesus, when we look at his life, we see Jesus came to a point in which he had 6 trials. There were 6 trials that were given to Jesus. During the time of these 6 trials that were given to Jesus, we need to understand that the justice system failed Jesus. So you know, if the justice system failed Jesus, the justice system can fail us as well. So as we look at how the justice system failed Jesus, Jesus had 6 different trials that he was set on, and he shouldn't have had any of them. There were 3 religious trials, and there were 3 civil trials that were tried to him by the Romans. So when we're looking at this, he had 6 trials. They started for him on Good Friday at 2 a.m. in the morning. How many know that you don't have court at 2 a.m.? Somebody type that down below. No court at 2 a.m. At 2 a.m. they started to try him. 2 a.m. till about 10 a.m. So it's 8 hours that they are trying and having Jesus on trial. And as we look at this, the Jewish religion trials were there to proclaim him to be a sinner. These are the religious trials. So he went through 3 religious trials. And when we look at this, the high priest, the first high priest, the high priest's father-in-law, Annas, he was the first person that they brought Jesus before. And we get that out of John chapter 18. And he began to question Jesus about his disciples and about his teachings. And as we are looking at this, that he questions him and then he sends him off to Caiaphas. Caiaphas comes with the second trial. But before Caiaphas really has his way with him, the Bible lets us know in Matthew that they began mocking and beating Jesus, the guards and so forth. So now he's not supposed to be on trial, and they begin to try him, and they begin to mock and beat him. As they are mocking and beating him, they put a blindfold around him, and one person hits him. They says, so since you're able to prophesy who hit you. Another one hits him. And then they say, who hit you? Prophesy to us, prophesy to us. So we can begin to see how they begin to mock him, beat him, blindfold him, and challenge him, prophesy who beat you. So as this trial is taking place, they are bringing false witnesses out to speak against Jesus. So now they stack the deck against him. They have false witnesses out testifying about Jesus. Jesus spoke of himself as the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power. So they said, we heard him say, I will destroy the temple made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another. I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. And then they says, tell us whether you are the Son of God. And they charged Jesus with blasphemy. And they charged him for proclaiming himself to be the Messiah, the Son of God. And they basically resulted in pushing him forward toward death. Now, the third trial, so he went before the old high priest. He went before the current high priest. And now they bring him before the Sanhedrin Council. And this was the religious governing body. They bring him before the Sanhedrin Council. These are men that were learned in the scriptures. They were astute to the word of God, but they were missing something. They had the information, but they couldn't really see who Jesus was and what was going on. So now he comes before the Sanhedrin Council, and here they are supposed to, if they are having someone before them and trying them, they were supposed to take a vote, and the vote was supposed to be private. But instead of doing that, they decide collectively, well, we're just going to basically find him guilty. And then they sent him off. So now their decision was death. So in every case, as Jesus is standing before the 3 sects of religious people, that now he is faced with death in their eyes. So now they move him on to the civil trial. They move him on to the Romans. Now, before we get quite to that, Jewish law said that there should be no trial during feast time. This was time of the feast. Jewish trial said each member of the court was supposed to vote individually to convict or to acquit. But Jesus was convicted basically in a common consent. Jewish law says if the death penalty was given, that there must be a night that passes before the sentence is carried out. But now, in Jesus' case, it would only be a few hours. So there was supposed to be no trial held at night, but his trial was held before dawn. The law says that the accused was to be given counsel or representation, and Jesus had none. The law says that the accused was not to be asked any self-incriminating questions, but Jesus was asked if he was the Christ in order to condemn him, to incriminate him. So all of the justice that was laid out for his protection came and was thrown out the window, and they tried him like they wanted to be tried him. What I want to say to you, and this might get some people's feathers ruffled, is this is similar to how we treat justice at times, because sometimes we just automatically want to say, oh, they guilty, oh, they wrong. Our law says we should be innocent until proven guilty. And the police aren't supposed to go out and try people in the street. The courts aren't supposed to look and see them guilty before they're guilty. If you ever had someone go to court and the judge looks as if they're disinterested, or they already made up their mind, this is a waste of time, then we aren't following justice. And when we look at, we'll go here, and this is what some people might not like. When we look at, I just use this because it's just a big case. It's a big case. When we look at O.J. Simpson and his trial, there were people who were so ready to find him guilty that they were upset that he was found innocent. And this is what we have to watch and be careful of, because when we have a justice system and we say that it's going to do something, we can't begin to decide that we don't like it. Now here we have to see that the justice system does find failure. The justice system, and here's a problem I have with the justice system, is that the justice system is mainly designed for people to plea bargain away. And that's bothersome, that we would rather people plea bargain away than to truly find out if they're innocent. But the system can't necessarily handle all of that, so they want to basically move into bargaining and so forth. In doing so with the trial of Jesus, we see here that Jesus was tried unjustly. And in doing so, we see our same justice system as the same failures that our society has today. And in looking at this, where do you want to see? I want to just show you how we can mishandle things. So take a look at me with me here for a moment. Let me do this. So what do we see when we see people? What do we see? And sometimes we see the wrong things. We don't see people for what they are. And we take for granted that these are people who are brothers and fathers and sons and all these different things. And as we look at this, we have to be mindful that we cannot take for granted that a person has value. And as we look at Jesus, there was no value seen in his life, but instead what was seen is how can I get what I want or get rid of who I want. In doing so, they took his life. They took his life in order to get by and to have things go the way they wanted them to go. Now, sometimes we don't know why people treat each other a certain way and so forth, and we don't know why that someone has grown up hating a certain person. But I go back to what I was saying Sunday, and that comes down to sin. I'm getting something else ready for you that I wanted to. That's why I'm a little preoccupied over here. I wanted to get this graphic to you just to show you how it's important that we really see what's happening in our lives and how we don't overlook something. We become complicit when we decide that we're going to overlook things that are happening in our life and in the world. And that's why it's important that we don't forget what happened in the life of George Floyd and how his life was taken too soon. It definitely was taken too soon. And we can begin to look at our lives and see that we are blessed for being able to be here. But now, since we are here and we're blessed, what should we do? Well, we have to remember what happened to this man. And we have to remember to continue to point out that that this life is gone, but we can't forget how it was taken. And we can't see someone else's life be taken the same way. We have to be mindful that, that is not turning out like I wanted. But it's going to work. No, I got to go the other way. We have to be mindful that this life is important and that we cannot forget about it. So now I want to prepare to show you something, and if you are a little squeamish about things, you may want to not take a look at this, but I want to show you, and this was big during the time. Oh no, that's not what I want. I may have to hold off because it changed on me. Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, so during the the name Emmett Till, that speaks out to it. The name Emmett Till, and we know that basically what happened during that time is that he was from the north. He went down to the south to stay with family for a period of time. And while he was down there, it was unfortunate, very unfortunate, that his life was taken for no reason at all. And in doing so, in taking his life, we see that this young man was harmed for no reason at all. Oh, that's why I see now. I'm sorry. This young man's life was taken for no reason at all. And we have to be mindful that sometimes we don't want to see stuff or we don't want to believe stuff, but that this was real and that this really took place. And here we go. So if you don't want to see this, turn your head for a moment and I'll let you know when we come back. So here we go. A young man brutally beaten and harmed. And the interesting thing about this here, and that's courtesy of Wikipedia, the images and so forth, And his mother made sure that the casket was left open. And it seems like, why would you want this to be open? His face is unrecognizable. But she says they have to see the crime that was done. America needs to see what took place in the injustice that happened, because possibly he was speaking to a Caucasian woman, or that he whistled at her, or he talked to her. That they just disliked him that much and didn't care about justice. So now when we begin to look at this and we begin to see the trials, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. And the Jews were upset about that. And then we go into the civic trials. We see that he was charged with inciting people to riot. He was charged with forbidding people to pay their taxes. He was charged with claiming to be the king. So he's charged with all these things that they're trying to get him for. And Pilate found no reason at all to kill Jesus. So he sends him to Herod. He finds out, oh, where are you from? Okay, you're going to go to Herod. He's going to make it. So Pilate found him not guilty. When Herod finds him, he's wanting to avoid political liability. And he sends him back to Jesus because he doesn't really want to deal with him. So he finds him not guilty. And the third trial that comes forth is now he goes back to Pilate, and Pilate's looking at him, and this was the last trial. And he's looking to almost find Jesus innocent, and he said, okay, the Jews have this thing that we do during this time of the feast and so forth. We'll offer up a prisoner so that you can be freed, and we'll offer up one in order for you to be able to let go as a people. And now the people have a choice in their life. And this is important for us to understand because we all have choices. So the people have a choice. And there's a decision to make about the people's lives. And this is a way for them to be able to find justice even when the court system has failed us, that they can possibly have justice. But the people are offered the prison Barabbas or Jesus to be crucified. The crowd has a decision to make about the life of two men. They have a choice to choose. In our lives today, we have choices all the time. We have choices to choose. And there's a choice. What will we choose? I want you to take one more look.
See the story of Jesus going to the cross, and everything seems to kind of be hand in hand. And then there's this one character that seems to interrupt the narrative. His name's Barabbas. We don't even even know much about him except that he's a murderer, leader of an insurrection, a rebel. And so in this moment, Pilate thinks, I hold the destinies of these two men in my hand. I know the Jews have a tradition that on a holy day, I will release one of the prisoners on death row. Pilate stands on this audacious stage, who now presents Jesus, Son of the living God, versus Barabbas, the thug and rebel. He says, all right, who do you want? Jesus? What has he done but heal, restore, deliver, set free, open blind eyes, open deaf ears, heal the lame and the leper? What has Jesus done? Who do you want? We want Barabbas. Yeah, give us Barabbas. Give us Barabbas.
What choices are we making? We have opportunities to do what's right. We have choices to make in life. And when we look at a spiritual matter and an earthly matter, when we look around, and like I said, it bothers me that there were officers who just watched and did nothing. Because this was the time to say that even though wrong is going on, that I must say something. When we look at our spiritual lives, what are we choosing? Are we choosing Jesus or are we choosing Barabbas? Are we making choices in our own lives that would be harmful to us? And we have to begin to look to see in the life that we are living, what kind of legacy are we leaving behind for our children and those that are coming behind us? Because as we watch and we let things go and as we watch and we say, well, you know what, I'm going to stay over here in my world, in my pocket, and life is good for me, so I'm not going to worry about them over there. But there are issues that are everywhere, and we have to be mindful that we need to speak up. We have to speak up about injustice, and God tells us that injustice is going to come. In Ecclesiastes 5, we said that justice is going to come. Marvel not. So don't be surprised when these crazy things happen. Crazy things happen, and we're wondering, how did this take place? How is this going on? God's saying, yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and we have to understand as Christians, people of God, that there's sin out there, there's evil out there, there's wickedness out there, there's hate out there, that all these things are out there. So why be surprised when someone who is a sinner acts like a sinner? Why be surprised when someone who's filled with hate shows hate? But we have a responsibility. And that's the point that I want to get at. Justice can be lost. And Ecclesiastes 5 and 8 tells us that justice was lost. Now, what I want to get to is coming from 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse number 11. Persecutions and afflictions which came unto me at Antioch and Iconium and Lystra. What persecutions I endure. But out of them all the Lord delivered me. The Lord delivered me. And we need to understand that as persecution, afflictions come, that God is able to deliver. That God is able for us to be able to count on and to depend upon and to stand on. Persecutions are going to come. Paul writes this, but he also speaks to Timothy about how God stood by him and gave him the strength. God will give us strength. He says, God gave me strength to be able to preach this gospel. So Paul deals with the continuous persecutions and afflictions in his life, and he says, God gave me strength. So I want to look deeper into that, is saying that God allowed Paul to endure what he was facing in order to preach to the Gentiles who needed to hear the word of God, but he gave him the strength to be able to go through and endure so that he would speak up. We have to have the strength today to be able to speak up and to be able to speak out as we endure persecution, afflictions, and things are going to come. And God has spared you. God has delivered you. God has allowed you safety and protection and all those things. But we still have a responsibility not to stay in a little box on our own street away from everything, but to speak up. So let me say this as I get ready to close out here. I want to say to you today that we have to look at these events that have happened in life, and we have to begin to understand that we're going to keep facing this and going through this unless we begin to be the catalyst for change. And what I'm saying to you is I don't want you to have the mindset that I'm starting to hear from so many people. Oh, the vote, make sure you get out and vote, the vote. When election time, vote. Yes, I want you to vote. So hear me when I say that. But what I'm saying to you right now is that we're going to be more meaningful and bring about more change if we begin to call and we begin to email our people that are local politicians, state politicians, and national politicians. It's time for us to quit waiting for something else to happen when someone else comes along, and let them know that the voice of the people are speaking now. We need to get a hold of our council people and tell them we're not happy about this. We need to get a hold of our state reps, and a lot of people don't know who their state reps are, but we need to get a hold of our state reps. Go to Google and Google my state rep, my senator, my representative, and it's time for us to make that voice heard. Our representatives respond when enough people are calling and emailing about a situation. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. If no one says much, but we go out and we protest and we rally and we do all of that, and buildings have been burned and places have been okay, great. But no change is taking place. What happens is what I want to call is the tantrum mentality. That if we see a child or someone act up and have a tantrum, we watch them, we give them some space, we listen for a little while, and we say, okay, you better now? And then we go on about our business. Now, I know some of y'all do something else, but that's a whole nother story. But what I want to say is that it's not about a tantrum tantrum, but now it's about making our voices heard. You got to speak up. You got to call the people that are in office right now and say, we're not going to wait until you get out of office, or we're not going to wait to get enough people to vote you out. We're asking you to bring forth change right now. We got to have that right now mentality, that right now we're looking for change. Right now we're looking for something to be done. Right now we're saying that we cannot continue to see lives harmed. I remember those that we're tired of seeing animals misused and abused, and we know Dick Goddard was behind that. They went down to the State Department, they went down and they talked to the representatives, and they said, we want the laws changed. And what happened? They got changed. So now an animal has the same value as a person's life, and you can face the same penalties in that case according to what is finally called Goddard's Law. So if Goddard's Law is out there, then how come we aren't looking also for something else to happen for the lives of these men and other people who are taken outright? We have to do something, and we can't wait for the next vote, but we got to make something happen now. So I want to encourage you, as your homework assignment, to speak to your reps, to go out there, to Google it, to find it. I don't care if they are not a part of the legislative body as our council would be, but we still need to make that voice heard and to push them to continue to make change and reform to the police departments that are local, as well as the state departments and national departments, and we got to bring forth a change. All right, thank you for joining us today and being with us. I'm just here. Thank you for being with me. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. Let's stay encouraged. I want you to understand, just as I spoke to you about God going through those trials, God understands and he feels what's going on. He tells us, don't be surprised. There's always going to be people and things out there like this. But I want you to know that even though God sees this and hears this, and that you may feel that he's not doing anything, he relates, he feels it. And as he strengthened Paul to go out and do his work, he's strengthening you to do a work now too. God bless you. I love you. Stay encouraged, and we will continue to move through this journey of life together. God bless.